Guys, we have a special bonus episode for you today, coming midweek. Back in the season 1 era, we recorded Substantive Cinema on Black Panther.
Yeah, we did that. I don't know if you recall this because it was like 2 years ago. This was the winner of the poll. We said, hey, audience, what do you want us to talk about for our next Substantive Cinema? This was like our third or our fourth one.
And Inception almost won. There's still a chance in the future.
And
though, guys.
Thank you. I do remember, Ethan Vogt, if you're listening, you're the only one who voted for Blind Spotting, which is what I was pushing hard for. Maybe one day we'll talk about that masterpiece. But here we are talking about Black Panther, a blockbuster for sure, but also a very substantive film. And now, in the wake of Chadwick Boseman's tragic, seemingly from a human perspective, his untimely death, just kind of hits a little differently.
Yeah, and can you imagine watching this film now, knowing that this whole time that this man is a superhero as Black Panther,
a king and a superhero.
He's battling cancer.
Yeah,
it's just wild. And it's deeply moving, and so we hope you guys enjoy what we had to say and some of our exploration of Black Panther.
Enjoy.
My name is King T'Challa, son of King T'Chaka. I am the sovereign ruler of the nation of Wakanda. And for the first time in our history, we will be sharing our knowledge and resources with the outside world. Wakanda will no longer watch from the shadows. We cannot. We must not. We will work to be an example of how we as brothers and sisters on this earth should treat each other. Now more than ever, the illusions of division threaten our very existence. We all know the truth. More connects us than separates us. But in times of crisis, the wise build bridges, while the foolish build barriers. We must find a way to look after one another, as if we were one single tribe.
You've landed on The Substance. I'm your host, Trevor Aiken.
And I'm your other host, Philip Marinello.
We're two guys thinking critically about faith, culture, and theology.
And we're back for one of my favorites, Substantive Cinema.
I'm telling you, that is so hard to say.
Substantive Cinema.
You got to hit the T, just like you told me last time.
That's very wise of me. I don't remember that.
Yeah. Well, I do all that editing, so I hear all that over and over again.
So welcome, listeners, back for another edition of Substantive Cinema, this time brought to you by you guys.
Yeah, your choice. Listener choice. That's the thing, Listener Choice Awards. That's not this thing, though. This thing is something you guys picked out from some polls that we did on the social media, and Philip was actually kind of sweating it there for a second.
Oh, yeah, let's tell this story. We didn't even talk about this in the prep for this episode, but thank you, every single listener who voted for Black Panther.
Some people might have voted twice.
I was really, maybe you voted twice anonymously.
I saw people in the Marinello family.
I didn't vote at all.
That.
Did you vote on Twitter?
I didn't vote
Be
at
honest.
all.
Okay, I didn't vote at all because
myself.
Twitter's anonymous.
Yeah.
And people could have voted on Twitter, and you would have not seen.
I didn't even know that.
Okay, well, I'm glad you didn't, because you probably would have voted for stupid Inception.
No. I told you I wasn't going to vote on it.
And I didn't vote either. I almost voted on Twitter for Black Panther when Inception, but I didn't. Okay. So we had the idea to open it up to you guys because we've been getting which just kind of help boost the community and interaction. We got some really good feedback from you guys, but wanted to hear back from you because the Substantive Cinema shows and the Substantive Stories with Keena and Love Made, and looking forward to some of the music ones too. Those ones, just honestly, on bare numbers, those are the ones that people seem to really like the most, or those are the ones that non-regular Substantive listeners come to the most. Those numbers are way higher than the normal episodes, which is great. So I wanted to put it out there for you guys to see what we wanted to talk to. And So I picked a list of movies because, as I'm sure we're going to get to in this show, and we talked about in the media roundup of 2018, Trevor is not a movie guy.
No.
So I put together a list of, I think, 4 or 5 movies that I like, and I was like, well, actually, Trev, you got anything? He's like, it's a pretty good list. And before I went to do it, he goes, well, actually, I got one. Put Inception on the list, and I was like, Inception? Like, really?
Yeah.
I was like, okay, because I didn't think anyone would vote for it. And just for the record here, Trev, I love Chris Nolan. I like Inception. Inception is a good movie, and you could say it's a thoughtful movie. When I thought about talking for like 50 minutes to an hour about the substance of Inception, like,
I'm telling you.
I feel like for me, once you get, because you're all about like, let's talk about the substance, not about the film. Yeah. Once you get beyond like, ideas are powerful.
That's huge.
But that's it. Like, what else?
Dream hypothesis.
This isn't the
ideas are huge.
This isn't the Inception episode. That's the episode that's not going to happen.
That's the episode everybody's going to vote on next time. So
no, it's not going to be enough. We're just going to decide to do blind spotting next because we need to talk about that one.
Listeners, you decide.
If we let you. So, Black Panther, pretty big hit. Like, really kind of took the entire world by storm last year. It came out in 2018. It was the first Marvel movie of the year that year, coming out in February, which is traditionally not a great time for big movie. Not a great time for movies. Typically, January and February, you get a lot of stinkers, and big companies hardly ever release things in the early part of the year, because you have the summer's where the money is, Christmas is where the money is, and then towards the end of the year, if you want to get Oscar nomination, you want to be fresh in the heads of the judges. So typically there's not a whole lot of great stuff that comes out in the first 3 months of the year.
They were being purposeful in releasing it in February too, right?
They were cool because they also had the Avengers coming out in the summer. They had Infinity War.
Right.
So you can't have Black Panther 1 week, trying to get it, have it make all the money, and then try to have Avengers also make all the money. Kind of have a bit of a conflict. Plus, Black Panther played a role in that, and so did Wakanda. Actually, Wakanda probably played a bigger role than Black Panther.
And it's probably not unimportant that February is Black History Month.
That's very true. Yeah. I didn't even think of that right now. Yeah, no, that was huge.
Yeah.
I knew a lot of my friends and the people that I follow on social media, Black creators and people in the comic book space and in the film space, just going nuts. I was pumped, but there was a special kind of energy there, and the numbers bore it out. $1.3 billion worldwide.
That's a lot of dollars.
Amazing. And very vindicating, because you have the worldwide statistic. Last year was also where Crazy Rich Asians broke a bunch of records as well. But with Black Panther, $1.3 billion domestically, you can say, hey, movies that have a more diverse set of representation are viable, so that studio execs have less kind of fallbacks as to where they don't have any excuses to not fund certain things that
feature minorities,
creators, or good actors, but that have minorities.
Sure. Yeah,
so it's great.
Yeah, you could probably fill this room with the dollar bills. Money that says.
Yep, and several others.
Yeah, probably. Dang. All right, so what about the movie was? What are some of the things that you're thinking of as substantive?
Let's start, before we dive right into that, is first impressions. We saw the movie together for the first time.
That's true.
I drug you to the theater.
Which is typically how I get there.
Yes.
But yeah, here's the thing. I like me a big Marvel film. I'm not the kind of guy who goes to theaters to see a think piece, right? Like, I
do know.
If I'm going to spend money and go to the theater, it's because whatever they're playing, I want to see on a big screen with really loud speakers and a nice seat. Like,
absolutely.
That's the whole point for me. And I think it's kind of that blockbuster kind of thing that I'm going to see. And
you go to see the spectacle. You go to have the theater experience for the spectacle films.
I've seen some of the lead up to this film, right? And some of the stuff. I don't remember which movie it was where King dies or whatever. And,
Civil War.
Yeah.
So that's where Black Panther was introduced.
Yeah. And so I'd seen all that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, this looks really interesting. Like, this
Which
looks
we
like
also
fun.
saw in the theater together.
Probably. And so I remember watching it, and I honestly had mixed first impressions.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, so
I had seen it before with my wife on opening weekend. Absolutely blown away. I might even get to some of the anecdotes of that as we get through here, but thought it was incredible. And I know that you sometimes go to the theater for Marvels and sometimes wait. And I was like, hey, man, you need to go see this. We need to go see this together in the theater.
Yeah, because I think that opening night was where you had the experience you'll probably talk about a little bit later. But I had different thoughts and feelings about it then than I do now after another watching of it.
Well, tell us let's start with first impressions.
But the first impression I had was I really felt mixed. I felt like there was a way in which kind of the villain and everything that he stood for was glorified in the movie in some way. Like, and that kind of relates to some things we'll talk about later, but I really did think that like they kind of blurred the lines a little bit on like what was right, like who was right and who was wrong. And like,
sure,
that was the tension I felt at first when I watched the movie was this kind of thing of like, man, like if I'm those kids that they depict in Oakland, the hero for me is Killmonger. The hero for me isn't necessarily Black Panther. It might even be Killmonger. And so that was kind of my first take, and I didn't know how I felt about that, honestly. But at the same time, I was like, it was a fun movie. It was a lot of really cool stuff.
A good point to jump in and say, we don't want to be too structural or segmented with this. One of, if not the best villains that the MCU has put on screen. And I've heard some hot takes to where so many people have said that and acknowledged it because it's very clearly the case that now the pendulum's swinging back where it's, Killmonger's kind of overrated. Like, no. If you watch that movie from top to bottom, honestly, I mean, you have Claw, you have Martin Freeman's character, his name's escaping me right now, but it doesn't have to be connected to everything else. It's a phenomenal movie from top to bottom that has an immensely compelling villain.
That's so true.
Or antagonist. He's a villain. But I feel like antagonist is maybe even better.
I think the thing is he's just so, the right word is sympathetic. Like you can feel his pain, like, and you can feel like his cause, and you can feel why he gets where he is. You know what I mean? Sure. It's not like one of those things where like the villain is given his monologue in a comic-y way, and you feel like, well, this guy's just off his rocker.
Yeah, he wasn't real mustache twirly. He wasn't necessarily megalomaniac. He was a guy who'd been hurt, and a guy who felt oppressed, and a guy who felt like his people were given a bad hand, and
he was trying to fix it in his own way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and so that was the tension I felt, and like I said, I'm not in the same spot now as I was then on it, but at the time I did feel like really torn by that fact, because I think it was hard for me to handle and deal with like this villain that is not maybe cut and dry, black and white, just bad.
Any other memorable first impressions?
That was the one that really sticks out to me as the thing I walked away from the movie thinking about, and usually is like some one strong thing I'm thinking about.
Nice.
The rest of it, I mean, I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
So fun.
Obviously, special
the tech was insane.
Cool.
The tech was insane.
So cool.
And you being a tech guy.
Yeah, it's always fun, and like the suit,
all that
super
vibranium
cool
stuff, the suit, and the little hollow bracelets
too,
and
like
stuff.
The way that they weave like some of these design ideas and things that are in the comic books that are like kind of like nerdy-ish is not the word I'm looking for, but like, you know what I mean? And they're like comic-y. It's like all like this kind of kitschy. I don't know if that's the word either, but it's it was off. But then you're trying to bring it into a movie and do it in a way that's not like just totally like buffoonery. That totally that makes sense in some way.
Well, that's also a really wonderful thing. There's probably not a ton of them we can necessarily hit for what we're trying to do, but just critically speaking and from a craft perspective, Marvel Studios does a wonderful job of taking things in comic books and putting them to film in a way that's feasible and plausible, and that you're not like, this is ridiculous. Just kind of offhandedly, I remember, I think it was the first Thor, I remember seeing and being so excited that like Asgard and the Rainbow Road and all these things, like I was seeing on the screen, and it wasn't dumb.
Yeah.
I was just like
how are they
Kevin Feige and all those directors and the writers and the producers, like they know what they're doing.
Well, and I think that's the thing is like they've really blazed that trail of thinking critically through like, okay.
Yeah, DC, take note.
How do we actually bring this thing and bring meaning to this and like integrate it into the cultural moment of the film that we're trying to produce and like
and be real to the heart of the character, but emotional through lines to today, to an audience.
That ties in with things that we understand. Because I know like one of the things that they were working on was the fact that in previous movies, they had already shown Black Panther.
Sure.
And the costume he was in there was not the costume they ended up wanting him to be in.
Yeah.
And so they actually figure out a narrative way to change it. And I didn't even realize that was what was going on, like when you watch it in the movie, but they do it in a way that like introduces this other character, the little sister, and like
who was one of my favorites.
Yeah,
Shuri was excellent. So I'm looking it up. So Civil War came out in 2016. Black Panther came out in 2018. I'm pretty sure, if I'm not wrong, the production, like the prep of Black Panther, started in like 2010, 2011. So they've been workshopping all this. They're like, oh, it's cool. We can put him in Civil War so that we can bypass. We don't have to do like a hackneyed origin story again. Here's his character. He's established. He's real. You have his father dying in Civil War. That's kind of the catalyst to this movie. So this movie can just go off and running, still be over 2 hours, but not waste any time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's cool how like they work some of those elements into character development. They're doing it in a real storytelling way, and that's what makes it not like.
And that's why multiple of their movies are making almost $1 billion, making over $1 billion, because they're making quality films.
Yeah, because they're understanding how they need to think about those different story elements and bringing them into reality, and they're spending the work to actually like work on those elements to get them right before they start going into filming and production and all that stuff.
I mean, there was so much. The villain definitely stuck out to me. I think the other thing that I really took away my first, maybe there's kind of two things, but the main one was just the family aspect of it. Kind of two ways. You have the family on screen and then the familial response and the showing up to the movie. So the movie had a very strong family dynamic. It kicked back to Captain America Civil War, where T'Challa's father died.
I don't even think I've picked up on that theme so much as when you're saying that right now. Like, now I see it now that you're saying that.
Yeah, it was huge. And then the beginning of the movie starts with what this is going to be. Okay, we forgot to say this at the top of the show. Spoilers. This is going to be
We're going to talk about the movie.
Yeah, we're going to talk about what happens.
So stuff will happen.
The film starts with what you end up finding out is T'Challa's uncle recounting the history of the Wakandan people to, I guess, Eric at that time, before he becomes the character that ultimately becomes Killmonger, and telling the story of the greatness of the Wakandan people, the strength of vibranium, the mostly unified nature of the Wakandan people, but then you have the one tribe that goes up to the mountains, but then you also have the Wakandans who decide to keep to themselves and not help out their fellow man. And you kind of see that family and unity and disunity, like these are going to be huge themes. You got his mother being a very strong character. You actually he interacts with his father on the ancestral plane, and Eric gets to interact with his father on the ancestral plane. His sister's a great character. She's kind of like the James Bond gadget guy to his like super spy.
That's so great.
And it's incredible. And then on the flip side, on the audience side, I've told you this story before. I tell it as often as I can. I was just so touched by I'd heard online about how whole families were going to see this movie. I was like, that's pretty cool. Kids, parents, grandparents.
Wow.
And then when I showed up to my local Cinemark, I saw that. I saw that in line. I saw it in the theater. You literally had multiple three-generation families, primarily black, coming out to see this movie because it was an event. Not that there haven't been other black heroes before, other black superheroes or black protagonists, but like this was something special because it's set in Africa. Wakanda's an African country, and one of the things of note that I was thinking about preparing for this show was I'm a huge movie guy, as you know, but when I think of Africa depicted in film, like I think of Blood Diamond and District 9 and Hotel Rwanda and Beasts of No Nation and like The Last King of Scotland, like you don't think of Africa and Africans presented positively and
or in any
strongly,
kind of position of power,
or in a way that celebrates the good. Not that there's no celebration in those things, but usually, man, it's about atrocity. And I mean, it's gone through a lot of atrocity, so that's not. Well, none of those things are inappropriate.
Africa's always like the subject of aid, right? Like this is where you go to help out, or like this is where people go to film stuff to make people feel bad,
or telling stories of trauma to kind of have awareness, like the Hotel Rwanda or Beasts of No Nation and things like that, with
stuff that has
genocide
really
and child soldiers and things like that. So that's typically what you see on the theater when it comes to Africa. So Black Panther was a whole different thing. And then the big kicker was after the movie was over, I have told you that before, I have never in my life seen this. So one of the things
you've gone to a few movies in the theater.
I would be interested to see the actual number. Definitely hundreds. I wonder if I've seen over 1,000 movies in the theater.
Do you
I'm
think
not sure
Heaven
if I
has
have.
like a stats page that you can like maybe one day like see how many times you've gone?
I can catch up on everything I haven't seen when I'm up there too.
I don't know about that.
Hey, it's a perfect place. Why not? So after the film was over, I sometimes like to go around and see what the posters are for the coming attractions and things like that. And as I was leaving my theater, there were people lined up to go to the future showings, and I was walking by a certain section of the theater, and I thought it was another line for another showing of the movie. But when I actually kind of looked and saw, it was people legitimately, like I would say over 150 people or around 150 people waiting in line to take a picture of the Black Panther like standee, like the movie poster standee. There was like a cardboard T'Challa. There was over 100 people in line to take their picture with it, and like
we saw this opening night together as a family kind of thing.
Like that was
we
very
need to document this event.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that
because this is meaningful to me and my family.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was important.
Are you like tearing up like right
now? A little bit, yeah. But it was just very. You saw these families were having a moment of celebration and togetherness. Like that's something that the parents and the kids are probably going to tell the next generation or two about. Like, I was there in 2018, and man, 2018, like what a great time for a movie to have such positive.
Yeah, we need that.
Yeah,
family's so important.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's stuff that we've talked about with friends of the show and with folks at church and things like that, about like just the breakdown of the family and things like that, and that being at the root of a lot of the societal struggles that we point to when we think about. And you know, to have a film to celebrate family in that way and to emphasize you know, the togetherness and to show healthy, you know, kind of
healthy relationships,
yeah,
and how vital they are to
and some silliness
accomplish
too, but
but like how important those familial relationships are into accomplishing your goals, into growing into the man or woman that you need to be. And it also between my sister and I, it gave us a really great gift. The when Shuri and T'Challa were like checking out afterwards, I really love that. We send that to each other every now and then.
That's funny. Yeah, so family is a huge topic in there.
And the music really stuck out, like how African it was, but also how modern it was. Like hearing hip hop, as a big hip hop fan, hearing hip hop blare out in these amazing action scenes, like it was completely unique.
Yeah. Watching the movie, there's just awesome blend of dramatic moments with your action sequences that are really attention grabbing, with things that are funny.
Yeah.
To kind of lighten up the mood of that moment. Like that formula, they just have it down so well where it's a fun ride the entire time. It's saying something, but like at the same time, it's not like too heavy on that point. And
and not that all of them do. That's why we picked Black Panther, because I also feel like, honestly, uniquely, and it's kind of interesting that it's Black Panther. I feel like the movie actually has a lot of things to say, and that's probably what we want to touch on a little bit here.
We want to talk a little bit about the character and like some of the development, like the main character, the hero of the movie goes through.
Sure.
So setting up at the beginning, he's talking to his dad about Wakanda.
Killmonger, yeah.
Killmonger is at the beginning?
Yep.
Or is it Black Panther?
In Oakland, that's Killmonger and his dad.
When they do the sequence, though, like of the animated stuff, about like
that's Killmonger's dad in Oakland.
Oh, I didn't even know that till this moment. That's all I thought.
Well, because that was the whole thing. It's like, why are we hiding ourselves? That was the question that opens up the movie.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's Killmonger's question that doesn't get answered. And then spoilers. Right. When he finds his dad dead, why are they hiding? They didn't help. They killed my dad. Then they left me here. Like, that's what kicks off the movie.
Yeah, and it's kind of like...
chronologically.
Yeah, so he asks, like, and are we still hiding today? And he's like, yes. And he's like, why? There's also... So, I guess I didn't even mean to jump onto Killmonger because I was actually thinking that was a Black Panther thing. So, obviously... I'm learning about stuff still. Average moviegoer guy here. But... Black Panther himself, I think about, like we were talking about family, that scene when he's talking to his dad, and there's just this really interesting moment that happens that kind of signals the almost like a defect, right, like the flaw. What do you call that? Like in story, when you talk about like somebody's not like a fatal flaw, but like a hero's like main flaw that they have that they need to deal with and overcome and face to kind of become the person that they need to be.
Sure.
And he kind of like, film has a really interesting way of signaling that, is that when he meets his dad, he kind of bows to him again.
Okay, so after he has his coronation service, essentially,
right,
where he becomes the king, which really emotional, great scene with his mom beforehand.
Yep.
Because they were planning. It seemed like the king may have been planning to pass on the throne while he was still alive, but now he's dead. It's going to him. So T'Challa had been preparing himself to take over and lead the people, and his mom was like, "Your dad and I talked about this." So I don't know if they were definitely going to wait until he was dead or not.
Interesting.
But kind of how she's like, "This is your day. This is your time." He does it. He actually has a challenge of M'Baku. He's got the humorous challenge with Shuri, where she raises her hand like she's gonna...
like, no, quit it.
But then you also have the M'Baku and the gorilla tribe.
And that's some good, like, early kind of leadership. But you also see the kind of leadership
the disunity among the Wakandan people there.
And that's some of like the power, like it's almost like every weakness can be also played off as a strength in a different direction, right?
Sure.
And I think that that's kind of, he has this weakness towards gentleness in a way, but also that can help him in his desire to see community and unity and to see the other perspective. And
are you saying he should have killed M'Baku?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying that it's his strength in that moment is actually related to his weakness that you see in kind of almost the next moment.
Gotcha. Okay.
Where like he's doing the right thing there and pursuing unity, pursuing reconciliation, and like
pursuing the good. I thought it was a great line every time I watch it. Hey man, stop! Like you need to lead your people.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be a fool. Like you fought well. Like you're not gonna win, and I don't want to kill you.
Right. And kind of that. He's pushing back on this kind of like honor and death before.
Yeah, the brutal system.
And so he's not willing to go there. But then kind of with his dad, it's kind of like, yeah, but you also have to be willing to stand up for yourself sometimes and take the harder road, not just the softer one.
So yeah, when he goes to the ancestral plane, which I was talking about, I remember this, where he meets his dad and the other Black Panthers, and like he's bowing down, like, and his dad's like, hey, Get up.
Stand up.
You're the king now.
Exactly. Like it's like he has not recognized this positional change in power that he needs to now.
He'd essentially been the prince for so long, and maybe even been like waiting to lead. Yeah, maybe even like getting stalled. Like he's got leadership skills, he's got fighting skills, he's got people that look up to him and respect him, but he's not established as a leader.
He just doesn't feel ready yet. And man,
which is so nice character-wise.
Yeah.
It's so nice to actually see like a character arc. Like T'Challa at the end is very different from T'Challa at the beginning. Well, and that's so satisfying.
Every
like
good story tells
dramatically.
Yeah. There's like a dynamic character who undergoes change. Like that's what we want to celebrate. But I can just say too that like I can almost empathize with T'Challa in ways that I didn't realize until like maybe just this moment where it's like,
oh, you've heard it here first.
Feeling of you're being called into something and you're like, man, am
I ready?
Am I ready for this yet?
Sure.
And feeling like there's got to be something more to prepare me. And sometimes that feeling of not readiness is not actually a lack of preparation so much, maybe as a lack of confidence.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what his dad is telling him, right? He's saying, like, listen, like it's a dad's job to prepare a son, you know, for his death. And he's like,
oh, that stuff gets me every time.
I don't know. Maybe that's a sensitive topic, but did you want to talk a little bit about maybe why that might hit you in the feels particularly?
I can answer your question, and it doesn't as much relate to this. I wanted to connect it to some of the director's other work, but as some of the listeners who know me well know, my father passed away when I was a senior in high school. I was
16, 17?
I was 17. 17. So yeah, like fathers and sons stuff, well told, truthful, traumatic, like stuff that has weight and stakes. Fathers and sons stories just get me. I was going to connect. So Ryan Coogler directed Black Panther kind of amazingly as his third feature. So he had a really good indie about I'm dropping the guy's name right now. Fruitvale Station, about a young black guy killed in Oakland. And then his second movie was one we talked about on the Media Roundup.
Yeah.
He restarted the Rocky franchise via Creed. And Creed was huge. Creed and Creed 2. He didn't direct Creed 2. He was a producer on it. But the fathers and sons themes, like the whole, am I ready? Like, what's my relationship to my father and his legacy? And people knew my father as like the heavyweight champion of the world. And T'Challa's people knew my dad as the king, the benevolent, good king for so long. And I want to follow in his footsteps. Like, Ryan Coogler gets those themes and does them so well.
Just like mentally distracted by like Scott Stapp for a moment.
I don't know who that is.
Lead singer of Creed, but
oh, awful.
Sorry.
That's disgusting. And if we ever do a Creed, we should maybe even do Creed 1 and 2 as kind of like a combo.
Oh, yeah.
Substantive cinema. So good. Like, and those themes especially. Crazy good. Cool. Sometimes get me real good.
Father-son stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because like, and it's interesting with T'Challa, because you said he was trying to live up to his father, but his father was kind of the gentle and good king, or at least at that stage of his life.
Yeah.
And we even find out throughout the film, his father wasn't perfect. His father made some fatal flaws that kind of set up the next generation of people to go through a really terrible conflict that in the end, it looks like definitely people were losing their lives over.
Yeah. There was no like death count in the war that happens, but it doesn't look like, everybody comes out unscathed.
People were coming at each other with spears and rhinos and stuff, so I'm sure guys were dying.
Big old rhino too, man. Things are
and Killmonger was killing folks.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if nothing else, spoiler alert, Killmonger dies, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you look at this all, and sorry if we're jumping around if you haven't seen the movie or if you're a little unfamiliar, but so King T'Chaka, it's revealed probably about halfway through the movie.
If you haven't seen it, stop, go watch it, pick us back up right here. We'll be waiting for you.
So you find out midway through the movie, the reason Killmonger can come to Wakanda and challenge T'Challa is because he is of royal lineage.
Yeah.
And some of the people are like, we've never heard of you. Like, who are you? He's like, I'm the son of Njobu, the king's brother.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what? We didn't know Njobu had a son. Like, Njobu went off, and we never heard from him again. And then you found out that King T'Chaka killed Njobu, his brother, and left his nephew, Eric, like, fatherless.
Yeah.
Just ghosted him, like, left.
I think this is an important point that I'm just thinking of right now, but, like, how important it is for, like, people to tell the truth. And to not, like, when you
I almost just did my Will Smith impression. The concussion. Tell the truth.
I haven't seen that one.
I haven't either. I've only seen the trailer.
Oh,
Man, Will Smith's been kind of whack lately with some of this stuff.
I was just thinking, like, when you hide something, like the power that comes that you lend to your enemies.
Evil,
yeah. When good people, like, hide the truth, or, man, did you just see it again and again in history that it does not come well. Like, if you had something that you think that you're not proud of, but can still speak to, like, here's where I was at, here's what was true, like, I will take whatever consequence for, like, it doesn't get better by just hoping everything will go away if you don't talk about it.
But I felt like, honestly, the biggest flaw or shortcoming of the movie that didn't make sense to me was that choice. Like, Zuri, the Forrest Whitaker's character, says to T'Challa, like, we had to protect the lie. And I was like, well,
what?
Why, though? T'Chaka was the king, and Njobu had essentially committed treason and then tried to kill Zuri, and T'Chaka killed him.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure he's heartbroken that he had to kill his brother. But you don't cover it up and leave your nephew there fatherless and not say anything to anybody.
I wonder if, like...
I feel like story-wise, I mean, they had to have that to make Killmonger the character, but, like, that doesn't make sense.
Well, and I'm still thinking through how to understand that line. Like, we had to maintain the lie, to the Wakandan people. We had to maintain the lie to
I feel like it was to
Eric.
the Wakandan... I think that...
Like,
oh, no, not Eric. They didn't care about Eric. I felt like what that meant was maintain the lie of, like... We're in unsullied. No, we're in unsullied place. Because I mean, they didn't expose themselves, but actually, no, they did. Because Claw knew about Wakanda. He came for the vibranium, and then essentially brought Killmonger in there. So I mean, they didn't kill Eric. They didn't kill Claw. They didn't track him down and kill him. So like, what I kind of felt like it meant, it was a little unclear, I guess, but what I took that to mean is protect a lie of like righteousness.
Yeah.
Like that they didn't do anything wrong. And honestly, though, like that's why I thought it didn't make sense because, like, yes, he killed his brother, but that was not the wrong thing in that moment.
Right.
His brother was a traitor who was about to kill
a king's servant or assistant or whatever.
So he didn't need to just dip and leave his nephew fatherless with a murdered father.
Yeah.
Like in his apartment. Eric's outside playing basketball, comes upstairs, and like his dad has like
his dad's room.
panther claws in his chest. Like,
yeah,
what do you think that's gonna do to like your 10-year-old, 12-year-old nephew?
Yeah, that's crazy.
And they're just like, no, we need to maintain the law. That was the only thing I thought just didn't make any sense.
No, that's a good point.
So slight nitpick, I guess, but it needed to happen for the character, I guess.
And I'd love to hear some other people's thoughts who are watching through this movie. Like when you get to that point, like maybe think through it. Like, what does he mean? Like what is the lie that's trying to be maintained there? Like, maybe there's another angle on that would make a little bit more sense, but I don't have it.
Maybe if I watch the commentary and get to the part, I don't know if I've seen that yet. But I mean, that's kind of the whole thing it hinges on. T'Challa learning this about his dad, like, this guy that just kicked my butt and stole my kingdom from me, my dad set him on his course because of an awful, awful, awful mistake he made. And the mistake he made was just not own up to the truth.
Yeah.
Just because the truth was painful. The painful truth of his brother being the traitor.
Yeah.
And that his brother was trying to kill his friend. And that he felt like he needed to kill him in order to protect him.
Is there another reason why we don't own up to truth other than the fact that it's painful?
Shame.
But shame is painful, right? Like, we don't like to feel that. Yeah.
Pain and shame. Like, you look at history, I'm sure plenty of stuff we talk about on this show. Like
not to downplay it, but like it all comes back to some sort of form of pain.
Yeah.
Right?
It's hard to look at shortcomings and flaws, whether that's personal or historical or institutional or what have you.
It's like as humans, we'd rather live deceived than face something hard.
And man, again, this is a story, and we're being like, what if in a story? If King T'Chaka grabbed Eric and is like, hey, I'm going to take you back. Njobi never took him to Wakanda. The whole thing, Njobu never took him to Wakanda.
Right.
It was all built up in his head. And he's like, maybe you can't go because I'm kind of an outcast.
Right.
But if T'Chaka's like, hey, nephew, let me take you back in open arms. We're so sorry. Maybe he gets adopted. Maybe he stays with the king, and he and T'Challa are raised side by side. And maybe he does challenge T'Challa for the throne, but it doesn't end as brutally as it has to end in this film.
Right. Yeah. What if? Alternate universe. There you go.
All that from a comic book movie.
Right. Yeah. So that's huge. I mean, just that truth portion, I think that's a huge thing. So
that's probably the most substantive thing in the film. One of them.
That's good. And I think getting back to then Black Panther to kind of round out his journey. His journey is...
So he finds out his dad isn't perfect. He's kind of timid.
Mm-hmm. And he's kind of having to step up to actually do something difficult. I kind of felt like the way that he bowed down and just let everything happen, kind of just went with the flow of tradition and everything, and just let this dude come in and take over your whole kingdom just because you can't beat him in a fight or something. I wonder if the ritual of like the having the Black Panther power drained from him and that kind of stuff too, like maybe plays into that. Like why that's an important story element that like they're having to fight on equal footing, and it's like
then it's literally the strongest person gets to be the king.
Exactly, but there's at some point it's kind of like, why even give this dude that kind of a chance? Or it's like you have this outsider who literally has never set foot in your kingdom, who like literally has this bone to pick.
Why not just Indiana Jones him?
His dad was like treasonous, and you're just gonna be like, yeah, sure, you're a legitimate challenger to the throne.
That's like, true. He shouldn't have accepted that challenge.
Yeah. Like, there's some ways in which you can just say, no, this isn't okay. Like, you've got to be able to, you'd think.
Well, and then you have the Wakabi character going like, yeah, this Killmonger guy, like, he killed Claw. T'Challa couldn't do that.
Right.
And, man, maybe we do need this kind of brutal guy.
Well, and that's one of the things his dad says to him is talking about, like, you need the people closest around you that you can trust. Mm-hmm. And this dude stabbed him in the back.
Yep.
Like, in a big way. Is there even justice for that? Like later in the film, like what's the reconciliation of that? I don't even remember.
Well, it was because it was ideological too. The whole Killmonger was right. Like W'Kabi was on his side and was married, I think, to Okoye, like the chief. I don't know what you call her, guard or general.
Yeah, they're husband.
And so they were just ideologically on other sides, and you had like that Rhino scene where the Rhino is charging at her, and he basically surrenders to her. Like, and it's kind of, and that's like the ideological thing where it's like, okay, like like I give up, like I'm not on this track anymore. So I mean, I'm sure they had words off screen. You're married, I'm married. I'm sure if we opposed our spouses to that kind of degree, and lives were lost, I'm sure there are words, but at the same time, it wasn't. Yeah, it's hard because it really is a battle of ideas.
Well, and speaking of words off screen too, I mean, you really see the battle of ideas in that thing
I showed you that deleted scene. I was listening to Ryan Coogler and one of his chief producers talk on a podcast saying how great there's a deleted scene. So if you have the Blu-ray or if you have it on digital, there is a deleted scene with Okoye and W'Kabi where they actually talk it out. It's like a 2-minute scene.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. To me, when you showed me that, I was like, this, honestly, to me, this, I felt could have, obviously, the directors or, you know, the editors, as they were putting it together, they couldn't find a spot for it.
Yeah, basically it was cut because you couldn't have it before it happened, and at the end, it's just kind of a train running towards the conclusion, and you didn't want to stop it for a 2-minute marital, like, ideation.
Let's talk this out. But what was really helpful in that is that when I was watching the movie, one of the things that, to me, kind of pulled me out of the immersion was the whole like monarchy thing. Like the thing I came away with at a certain point was like, this is why you don't do monarchy, because then dumb stuff like this can happen where some random dude shows up on your doorstep, says, hey, you have to fight me by some tribal law, and the dude's like, well, I guess I have to, loses the fight, and now you like literally have all the power of your country. Like,
so many cool shots in the movie when Killmonger steps into the room after he's king, the upside down with the music.
Yes,
like every time I see that movie, that moment lands perfectly. That's like a perfectly edited scene.
Yeah, all the cinematography there, everything was good.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, because it's like they literally
it's upside down.
Literally turns the whole world upside down for these people, and he just lets them do it, like for the dumbest reasons, it seems like. But then the deleted scene you were mentioning kind of connects it all through to like what it represented, what he represented, and like the social moment of Wakanda feeling like they had more to offer, that feeling like they didn't just have to hide.
That T'Challa was not bringing justice to the people who were attacking it and their brethren around the world, and that was his dad's thing. That was Killmonger's dad's whole thing, where it's like he kind of flipped and became quote unquote treasonous, which actually was treason, but he should have just gone and talked to his brother,
as opposed to like pulling a gun out on a dude.
Yep, not a great thing to do with a guy that has a Black Panther suit,
right? Yeah, but kind of representative of like
seeing
that
the suffering
that he feels.
Seeing the suffering, he's like, our people are, and then you have all of the really nicely done. I didn't think it was being heavy-handed or beating you over the head at all. The social issues that we face in our days, like there was the slavery, but like the over policing and the incarceration and like
the assassination of our
people
leaders
are being oppressed, and we're hanging out in Wakanda just chilling. We got all our vibranium and like we're living large, and like my brother's suffering's not my problem. So he took it up to be like, I want to help. Didn't do it the right way. Got in with Claw, all these things. Killmonger obviously didn't want to do it the right way, but he's like, I want to help.
Right. And so the whole thing.
Well, no, that's false. It's not I want to help. It's I want to dominate.
I want to dominate, yes.
You have the seed of an idea that is good, that goes to where he is a villain, where it's like, I want to dominate.
Right. That's why I say, too, he is such a sympathetic character, because there's aspects of that where you can say, like, I mean, yeah, if there was a country out there that had all of these crazy resources that was so far ahead technologically from everyone else, that like had good social order and perspective on things, obviously not so much when somebody can just come in and trash the whole thing, but you would think like, man, you should be participating on the global stage. So to me, that scene, just to kind of wrap it back up, like that kind of tied it back into, this isn't just some weird like you found a loophole in the monarchy and the tribal law to like do a stupid hostile takeover that makes zero sense at all.
Some people were behind him.
But it was literally like he had some backing. He had some support of, no, he's actually bringing some of the aggression that we kind of want, that we feel like is ours maybe by right, which there's a danger there, right? Of pursuing what you feel like is just.
Trying to right wrongs with improper methods.
Yeah, like being willing. And that was the thing for him, like the dude who's the rhino leader.
Oh, yeah,
guy.
Wakabi.
Yeah, sure. He's kind of got this moment where it's like he's willing to sacrifice values to get what he feels like is justice for him.
Sure.
And it's shown in that movie is wrong, right? As the wrong choice to make. Nobody's
on his side.
Right. After they resolve all the Civil War stuff that they go through.
Sympathetically, I just remembered one of the things I remember the first time I saw it, when they had that moment where he was charging on the rhino towards the M'Baku, the leader of the gorilla tribe, and his wife steps in front of the rhino, and the rhino stops because like
and just looks around the face.
He loves her, and he's like, oh, it's mom, and he licks her or whatever. And he gets off, and they have their little exchange, and he's like, would you really kill me or something like that? And like she lifts her spear, like dead,
to his neck.
Dead serious. She's like, for Wakanda, like in an instant or something, like without question. I had a group of 5 or 6 black ladies behind me the first time I saw it. They went nuts. They were cackling and cheering. They loved it because it's like, he's wrong.
Right.
He's wrong. It's not just going to be like, you're my woman. You're going to like, you got my back, right? She's like, no, I don't.
Right. Yeah, and it's a powerful moment, really, because you do have, she's a very strong character.
She's like the head general or whatever. She's like in charge of the army.
She's martially, like, and physically, obviously, really strong. And he yields to her.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. Just from a biblical perspective, obviously, it's kind of turning things around a little bit in a way. But, like, there's a place for it where there's moral grounds that people are standing on and saying, like, this is right, this is wrong. Like,
well, and in that moment, he realized, like, hey, been a good run. Like, we don't have a chance. And also, it's pretty crummy to try to oppose my wife and my best friend, too. Like, they actually have our best. Like, it'd be great to get vengeance on everybody, but that's probably not.
And they show in that scene, he's looking around, and he's seeing, like,
his guys die.
Who's dying here? Like, who's suffering here? It's all of our people. It's all Wakanda. So,
and he's like, man, I want to stop all the suffering of my people.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, snap, I'm causing the suffering of my people.
Right. And like, at least to think in that moment, like, maybe this isn't the way. Like, maybe there's some things that are right about what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing, but maybe this isn't the way. And ultimately, that drives back to T'Challa's character and some of the stuff he ends up realizing about how he should deal with things, right?
Yeah.
So he has a big fight, Killmonger.
Really nicely choreographed, too. Like, there's all these stakes, and like you said, it goes up and down. It never stops being entertaining, and it never stops, like, being done really well.
Right. And so when he delivers, like, the fatal blow to Killmonger, which in some ways
doesn't usually happen in the MCU. It's kind of
that's
more powerful and impactful.
Yeah. And in some ways too, like, there's this option given to, like, no, you can live.
Oh yeah, because Shuri's got like the healing, like the vibranium technology.
You could totally do that.
It healed Martin Freeman's character in like a day of like a spinal gunshot.
Huge, yeah. And so he's got this huge knife in his chest, and he starts reminiscing of, like, man, my dad always talked to me about how great like a Wakandan sunset is and this kind of stuff, and like never even seen this whole place. Like, this is just all like it's almost like he's realizing, like,
the weight
he's
of what
missed out on the wonder and the beauty of this place because he wanted to dominate it so badly. So T'Challa takes him out, they see it, he's like, it's beautiful, and then he's given the offer of, hey, like, we can heal you, like, wants to bring him around to, like, this doesn't have to be a fatal wound, but that's not what he chooses.
No.
Ultimately, he's like, I would rather you bury me with the people whose bodies were thrown into the sea, who jumped over the boats, rather than be in bondage, because they knew that, like, to die free was better than to live bonded. And he says, like, what would you do? You just lock me up. You just incarcerate me.
Yeah.
And so just once again, tying in a ton of the themes there that they're hitting on.
Yeah.
So once again, such a sympathetic villain in a lot of ways.
Because, I mean, you can't not feel for him in that moment.
Yeah.
Where it's like, man, he's made those decisions to get there. You want to see him get a second chance, but you also understand, like, he's like, no, like, I don't want to.
This is who, yeah.
I don't want to be a lifelong prisoner.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, you see the way it goes for villains, too, in the MCU. Like, that's it. Like, and until they get out and do the next heinous thing or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
They don't really stop being the bad guy.
Which is also, we've been talking for a while. We might want to get to wrapping things up.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done an official ranking, and Captain Marvel just came out. Endgame's coming up soon, but if you take the 3 Avengers movies out of it,
mm-hmm. Black
Panther is definitely in my top 5, if not top 3, Marvel movies. Because it's such a strong movie from top to bottom. The villain, I think the only one that can really contend with him is Winter Soldier, which is also a great, like, thriller film.
Yeah.
And a sympathetic and complicated bad guy who actually goes on to get redeemed, which is interesting. So, I mean, really...
hero.
Yeah, really, I feel like... Yeah, Winter Soldier... Captain America, Winter Soldier, and this, or maybe my top 2.
Yeah, it's good. I don't know... I can't really rank.
There's so many good. They're getting so, like, they got the formula down so good, like you said. And they had, like, Spider-Man Homecoming and Thor Ragnarok. They're all so fun and so good. So I don't know, but it's up there very high.
It's a good movie.
It's got real stakes, and I really do appreciate that. It's like they took care of him.
So I mean, is there any reason you wouldn't recommend this film?
That's an interesting question. I didn't even know if we were going to talk about that. I have seen all the Marvel movies. I don't know if you've seen all of them. Have you? Maybe you missed a couple here and there.
There's a few here and there.
So they started. I mean, for being honest, Iron Man, I wouldn't necessarily say it's necessarily disqualified, but Iron Man definitely had some suggestive content in there with Tony Stark's, like, playboy lifestyle.
Sure.
But the movies were relatively pretty clean. Like, obviously there's violence and blood and, like, some language, but I think it was probably with, like, Guardians of the Galaxy they started getting a little saltier.
Pushing the language boundary a little more.
Yeah. And
that's
with
true.
some of the newer ones, maybe a little bit more bloody and a little bit more this and that.
Yeah.
I'm probably a more I imagine I'll be shocked if I'm not a more permissive parent than my wife.
Sure.
But I think it all lands and it all makes sense. But yeah, there was some language in the movie, not a ton.
That's true.
But I do remember going, like, I have a nephew that's like 6 or 7, and it all made sense. It's like, especially in some of the scenes.
They're not just throwing it in there to have, like, racy stuff or to have, like...
And I feel like some of the films maybe were a little salty just to be salty. I felt like it worked in Black Panther. Yeah, no, I don't think it was necessarily over the top, but there was probably more language than definitely the earlier Marvel films.
Yeah, no, that's a good observation.
It's a consideration. If that's different, I'm not anybody's Holy Spirit. Different people have different things and a little bit of language.
Absolutely.
But yeah, IMDb's great. It's got all sorts of stuff. Nothing other than that. That would be my own. And I might not even raise that. Like, if you're a grown up, I would just say, "Hey, you seen Black Panther? It's pretty great, huh?"
Yeah. No, I think it's good.
I'll probably show it
about that angle.
I would show it to Ezra before I showed him, like, the Guardians of the Galaxy movies.
Yeah, I didn't. You know.
Yeah, they're a little bit more crass, or even Ant-Man. Like, it's fun, but it's a little bit more crass.
That's true.
I would definitely show him Black Panther before I showed him Guardians or the Ant-Man movies, because it is all substance. It's in service of a lot of real things, and we've talked about in our media show, like, whether it's an album that has language or a movie that has language, like, there's a difference between being exploitative and sensational and genuine. And I'm not going to say, like, the whole argument, sin is sin, sure. But, like, I didn't write the screenplay. I didn't write those words down. I didn't say those words in front of the camera. So if it serves the story, let your conscience kind of be your guide on that one.
No, and, we're still going to wrestle through those things, still think about those things. So I think it's a good thing to bring up for people to wrestle through, think through, and be aware of. But yeah, I would say I mean, this is one I would definitely watch with my parents, watch with my family. Like, it's good to think about, good to talk about. So,
I mean, I have it in my digital collection, but that's one I buy and have on my shelf. Like, it's a great one. Yeah. Very rewatchable.
Absolutely. So, if you haven't checked out Black Panther yet, we'll get that iTunes link for you in the show notes so that you can purchase it, watch it, and continue to enjoy that.
So moving forward here, we're certainly not going to be doing this every time meaning the polls. So we're not going to have a poll and have the listeners decide every substantive cinema or every substantive
song. But one of these days, you guys
will
get a chance to decide.
Hey, if you think there's an hour's worth of actually substantive things to talk about Inception, let those votes come. But we're not just going to decide to do an Inception.
Some of those folks out there want us to talk an hour about like the very last scene only, too.
That's so stupid.
Well,
it either is or it isn't. Who knows? I'm not Chris Nolan. Chris Nolan doesn't even know. Chris Nolan wants you to figure it out, so you figure it out. Like, it doesn't matter.
But what if I figured it out, Philip?
You haven't, because the writer didn't figure it out, and it doesn't matter.
So good.
So look for, but we will probably every now and then be taking polls on. Send us an email at thesubstancepod@gmail.com. Tell us what movies you think have important themes or are really excellent that would be worth looking at in a longer form. And we even talked about maybe doing, I don't know how this would work with our time, as we're not necessarily getting a ton of cash coming in through this.
It's not a full-time job for sure.
Topic toss-up with some of these things. So
yeah, that was a great idea.
I think that's great. We might have to do stuff we've already seen, or maybe do some short form stuff to talk about 4 movies in one show. It'd be pretty gnarly.
Yeah, be tough. But yeah, you could also, if you're on Twitter, send us a tweet at the Substance Pod. At the Substance Pod.
And you can call us on our phone line
913-703-3888.
And also just feel free to leave us a message, like I said, on the phone line.
Yeah. You guys have probably just recently heard we've had some listener mail, a voicemail, and so we've got to play that on the episode. So if you call in that number and leave a voicemail, you could end up on the show. So there's some incentive right there for you. But yeah, check us out on Facebook, check us out on Twitter. Let us know what movies we should do next. Let us know your thoughts on some of the things we had already talked about. And anything else before we wrap up this episode, Phil?
I wish I would have written it down. I definitely have a thing. You could probably see on my face. I was trying to remember.
Oh, really? Yeah.
What in the world it was. I don't know. Maybe if I come up with it, we'll insert it in later. But that's about it for me on that one, I think.
So for now, it's The Substance signing off. Reminding you. What? Huh?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You said signing off. You're doing a podcast.
It is a podcast.
I'm outside critic, man.
It is a podcast.
You're like this. You're like that. Like both of those old dudes sitting up in the thing in the Muppets. Like just that guy's doing a podcast.
I'm on a podcast.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, thanks for joining us today. We will see you later. And remember, what is true is always greater than what is simple.